Guys, great to see you. Great to see you tonight. Our topic is Catholic moral teaching. So it's a tough topic. I want to say one more time, though, welcome again if you're here for the first time, especially if you are not a religious person. Just a brief bit of context. What makes this a tough topic is that Catholic moral teaching touches on a lot of things that are often pretty close to our hearts. And a lot of the Catholic Church has difficult teachings in areas such as sexuality, drugs, drinking, marriage. We're not going to talk specifically about those things tonight, but we're going to kind of give the undergirding or the principles that the church gives for us with regards to those teachings. So, like was mentioned, this is actually the second of a series, part 2 of a series. Remember when Father Jake spoke to us about a month and a half ago? He spoke about freedom. It was the same night that, if you were there, we did the Harlem Shake dancing. So an excellent example of a spirit of freedom. One of the things Father Jake said there, and one of his key points, I think, was that freedom, true freedom in the Christian life, is not simply a freedom from something, such as freedom from rules, but it's a freedom for something else. And what could that be? I want to give just an illustration of what that freedom is for. One of my housemates, Brother Sam, he's probably the funniest person in about a 500-mile radius of the Twin Cities. And just 2 days ago, he gave a talk to a bunch of middle schoolers in a confirmation class. And he said that after he gave the talk, despite using tons and tons of humor, he got no reactions at all. No reactions whatsoever. Why do you think that was? I think the answer is that these middle schoolers, probably like ourselves when we were in middle school, were not free. Even if they thought something was funny, they didn't feel safe to laugh because they were judging themselves on the basis of their peers or their own hearts or whatever. Rather, what we want to experience as Christians is a complete freedom and confidence, identity in our sonship or daughterhood of God. We want to be confident in that identity, and that's where we get the freedom for what? To be who God made us to be. That's where we left off when Father Jake spoke to us. Christian freedom is about God helping us be who we were made to be. But I think if we think about that carefully, there's something at least a little bit contradictory about that, because the Catholic Church, the same church which is telling us that true freedom is about being who God made you to be, is also the same institution which is giving us all of these moral rules which tend to cut against the things we want to do. How am I supposed to express myself if the church is giving me certain norms that in order to abide by them, I can't really be myself? How does that work? I mean, after all, it's my life, right? I should be able to have the full extent of self-expression. It's mine, after all. It's mine. I think even if you're like me or you've been Catholic for a while, hopefully that kind of statement, it's my life, is something that rings true somewhere within your hearts. And even if we don't say it out loud, it's something we all used to say out loud, isn't it? It's mine. It's mine. Remember, as a toddler, I said that all the time trying to take toys from my sister. It's mine. Somewhere deep inside us, this is what the church calls original sin from the very beginning of our lives. There's something within us that turns us inward toward ourself. This is the most basic teaching that the church has with regard to moral theology, that somewhere deep inside of us is a basic inclination towards evil, towards selfishness, towards pride, and towards sin. So I think we see that in all ways. Certainly my mom saw that growing up. One of the things my mother would say to me is, Matthew, the whole world doesn't revolve around you. And it really shook me up. Not only was it the first time that I kind of almost understood a metaphor, I just suddenly imagined the whole universe revolving around myself, but also spoke to something deep inside me of, oh yeah, Mom, you're right. Even though I'm 6 years old, I definitely kind of believe that the whole universe revolves around me. But I don't want to say that this kind of inclination towards evil is just something that we experience as little kids. Rather, the laws of all societies, especially all great societies, are constructed under the assumption that people need help from outside to do good. So, for example, a country like our own, we're obliged to pay taxes. Part of the reason for that is without that obligation, I just don't pay taxes, and therefore I'm not helping my peers in society to the degree that I should. So guys, here's the deal. I think this part is not too controversial to us. We know that all society needs rules, and therefore perhaps we ourselves need rules. I think where the rubber hits the road, where we really question in our hearts is, well, why can't I do what I want as long as it doesn't hurt other people? That's the question we really want to know. Fine, God, you can make laws, but I kind of want to do what I want as long as it's not hurting other people. So why does the church impose these difficult rules that constrain my life, even when I'm not hurting other people? There are at least three answers, three pretty good answers that I know of to this question. Two of them you might not like so much, and the third one we're going to try to talk about next time. So bear with me here. These first two answers, I think will push some buttons. At least they do in my own heart. The first answer is this: why can't I just do what I want as long as I'm not hurting other people? On a basic level, because what we want is not always what we should do. What we want, our desires are not always oriented towards the good. How many of you guys have younger siblings? If you have a younger sibling, you'll relate to this especially. If you don't, imagine it. You have a younger sibling, say they're in middle school or high school, and you look at their life and you say, okay, they're kind of immature. And if they would correct these attitudes in their life, they could do a lot better. I don't want to actually analyze our siblings, but I want to step back and analyze ourselves. If we're in the position where we as young adults are willing to call someone else immature just because we have a greater perspective on their own lives, I think that therefore we should be open to that same judgment of ourselves, that actually there might be more. I haven't quite arrived yet, and not all of my desires are yet oriented towards the good. And that's a journey for our whole lives. So that's the first thing I want to propose, is that the reason we can't just do whatever we want, even if it doesn't hurt people, is that because not all of our desires are good themselves. The second piece is this: as Christians, when we analyze whether an act is good, we don't simply think about how it will affect other people, but we also consider in our sphere of obligation God himself. So for Christians, we were made, this is all people, but Christians believe this, that we were made for a relationship with God, and everything we do, this is the crazy thing, everything we do affects that relationship. Rather, God is with us at all times, and so whatever we do, he sees. Whatever we do, he knows. And therefore, everything we do in life affects our relationship with him, for better or for worse. So guys, I hope that helps answer at least that first tricky question. Why can't I do whatever I want, even if it doesn't hurt other people? The third answer is, again, we'll explore next time, probably next semester. We'll analyze individual acts themselves, some ones that are more familiar to us, and say, what is it about this particular act which makes it difficult or is offensive to God? Why is this act offensive to God and therefore not good for me? But rather, I simply want to try to answer one more question for us tonight, and it's this one. Okay, fine. Maybe God has some rules out there, but is that teaching correct? Did he have to do it this way? Because it kind of seems like the way he did it really is a high bar. And I just don't think I'm up for that, or whatever the case. Or it seems like perhaps he could have tweaked the universe in such a way where different moral laws were in place that were a lot more fun. Why didn't God think of it that way? These are great questions. I can only attempt a partial answer to that. And to do so, I'm just going to review for us, first of all, that most basic teaching of the Catholic moral tradition, that in each of us, because of this original sin, each of us has an inclination towards evil. An inclination which is only overpowered by grace, the grace of Jesus Christ. Now, because of this inclination towards evil, we tend to have obscured in our hearts what is the right thing to do. We have a natural law. Each of us has a natural law, our conscience speaking through our hearts what is the right thing to do. And because of sin, it's distorted. What was God's answer to that? His main answer to that was not actually the Ten Commandments, although that's part of it. God's main answer to us being confused about what to do was to send his son, Jesus, into the world. And Jesus, during his earthly ministry, gave teachings. He gave many teachings, many of them pertaining to the moral law. And this isn't just some guy, remember. This is Jesus Christ, Son of God, God who made us and knows us as our maker. Jesus Christ who rose from the dead, demonstrating that he is God. So the teachings he gave came from a place of him knowing, God knowing us inside and out. He knows the human condition like no one else. And it's out of that place, out of his love for us, his love that sent him to the cross, Jesus proposes certain moral rules, certain moral rules. And therefore, since then, of course, Jesus wasn't teaching to say bioethical issues of the 21st century, but he entrusted those moral teachings to the church, who has preserved them, the church has preserved them, and then applied them in our own times. So, guys, my encouragement is this. If you believe that Jesus rose from the dead and he truly was God, and that he said these things, and that the church has faithfully carried on those teachings and not added to them, but rather preserved them and applied them, then I think we want to trust, even if it's at first unfriendly to us, we want to trust that Jesus knows what is good for us. Therefore, I just want to leave us with two questions for us to think about. I think no matter where you're at tonight, God has something for you, a part of this message that he just wants you to sit with that. Two more questions to bring to your prayer as we go from here. So one is, if God spoke something to you tonight, my question, I think the Lord's question is, will you give him a chance? Will you give him a chance to speak to your heart? Will you spend time in prayer and let him continue to form your desires so that your desires become aligned with his will? This is something that takes our whole lives, But will you give him a chance to do that, to craft our desires according to his will? The second question is this: will you let him show you that a holy life is an awesome life? It's a life full of joy. It's a life of rich relationships. It's a life of adventure that the world can never understand on its own. Will you let him show you that? I think most of us here have had a taste of that. Brothers and sisters, we can go a lot deeper. So my final encouragement is to us as a community, as Catholic Students United, or if you're new here tonight, are we going to give this paradoxical teaching of the church a chance in our own lives? And the paradox is this: are we going to follow God's law and by doing it experience freedom?